Bonjour, Kinamagi and Ireland and Dejnikas, and welcome to tonight's production of the Mind Math Network. Today's episode, Estimating Sums and Differences. Let's begin by looking at the assignment from our previous session, where we were subtracting unlike fractions. Our basic steps were to find the least common multiple of the denominators, which gives us the least common denominator. Find equivalent fractions with that as the denominator. Then we subtract and simplify. So 1/2 minus 1/4 is 1/4, because it's 2/4. 7/8 minus 1/4, which is really 2/8, gave us 5/8. 7/12 minus 1/6, which comes to 2/6, is 5/12. In each of these, they picked one where one number went into the other, and that's why we had those as our common denominators. Over here, we had 11/16 minus 6/16, which gave us 5/16. Over here, 3/4 of 1/6 was 7/12 of a pound. 1/2 mile, and then another answer of 1/2 mile. Let's look at today's work, just so you can kind of see what's coming up. And you can see that we're going to be rounding mixed numbers to the nearest whole number. This will kind of come back to where we were with rounding to benchmark fractions, except that we're not going to consider 1/2. We're just going to go down to the previous number or up to the next. This is where a number line could be useful, or just knowledge of what a number line might look like in your head from there. And we'll talk about some tricks in just a moment. You can see that's going to be our key thing on the assignment today. So let's look at our essential question here on this final lesson of chapter 9. Oh, sorry, before the check my progress. There'll be a quiz tomorrow. Sorry to get your hopes up, but we're going to miss some things there. All right, so how can equivalent fractions help me add and subtract fractions? So I'm going to pick the initial part. Why is it helpful to understand sums and differences? Well, to estimate sums and differences. Sometimes I don't need the exact answer. I only need a generalized answer. I need the about. Just like if I was doing with decimals, the same thing applies with fractions. It doesn't change because I went to fractions. So we have a problem here. My inability to get this correct is probably the problem. Estimate the sum by rounding each mixed number to the nearest whole number. So I'm going to go 5 1/7 plus 11 5/8. And now to do this, because we're just rounding, I don't need to worry about a common denominator. And I know that if I'm rounding with 5 1/7, it's either going to be 5 or it's going to be 6. And then my next part is to look here, 1/7. I recommend that you take the denominator and then you look at the numerator. If the numerator is more than half of the denominator, then you round up and it becomes a 6. But 1 is less than half of 7, so it'll stay at 5. 11 5/8. You got the 11, so it's either going to be 11 or 12. And 5 is more than half of 8, so I'll go ahead and add 1 here, and I have 12. Now I just add, just like you would any other day. 5 plus 12 is 17. So 5 1/7 plus 11 5/8 is about 17. Real basic parts again. Just look at the denominator. If the numerator is more than half of it, you add 1 to this. If not, you keep it the same. You see the answers on the previous one were good. All right, Jack and Alex are standing 10 2/3 yards apart. Jack moved a yard and a half closer to Alex. Estimate how far Jack and Alex are standing apart now. Show your work. Right, okay. So I start at 10 2/3. Minus 1.5. So we start at 10. Start at the 0 and 10 to be specific. And I look next door and I have 2/3. 2 is more than half of 3. So this will add 1 to 11. 1.5. 1 is exactly half. And this is, if you remember back to decimals, if it's at 0.5, then we go up. So we will go up to 2. 11 minus 2 is 9, standing about 9 yards apart. 1/2 again is 5/10 or 0.5. Go ahead and clear it. Let's get into the textbook piece right now. And this will be on page 663. The expectation is that you'll fill this in as we go along with my teaching. If there's a part where I'm about to clear the screen, you can, and I will make a comment about clearing the screen or moving on. You can always pause the video, continue writing, and then move on when you're ready. So let's start with example basic. Lucida and Alexis went scuba diving for 7 1/3 hours. The next day, they went scuba diving for 4 2/3 hours. About how many hours did they spend scuba diving altogether? Altogether tells me it's going to be adding. And I can see that we're going to estimate 7 1/3 plus 4 2/3. So I look here, 7 1/3. It's either going to be 7 or 8. 1 is less than, 1 is less than a half of 3. So I'm going to keep it at 7. 4 2/3, it's either going to be 4 or 5. 2 is more than half of 3. So that goes up to 5. 7 plus 5 is 12. So 7 1/3 is plus 4 2/3 would round up. If I round both pieces, I'll get an answer or sum of about 12. Go ahead and fill that first pieces in. Give you a few seconds to do that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear my drawing. We did good there. And I'm going to go ahead and just hit this so you can write that in. There's a helpful hint that you should always be looking at. And if you have the paper in front of you, you should have looked at already. Those wiggly lines means about or approximately equal to. Tells us it's not an exact answer, but it's close. And you can go ahead and write that they just kind of kept the 12 a couple more times, as my math loves to do. They just want to have you practicing your penmanship and writing 12. Okay. Let's move on to example niche. This is at the top of 664. This would be another one where there's some things below it, but see if we can get it close. All right, one sea anemone is 3 1/4 feet across, while a second sea anemone is 5 3/4 feet across. About how much longer across is the second anemone? So we're looking at a difference. Tells us subtraction. And our first number is 5 3/4 minus 3 1/4. Round each mixed number to the nearest whole number. So this is going to be 5 3/4 is either going to be 5 or 6. 3 is more than half of 4, so that 5 becomes a 6. Now over here, 3 1/4, it's either going to be 3 or 4. 1 is less than half of 4, so it stays at 3. 6 minus 3 is 3. So the anemone is about 3 feet longer across. Go ahead and write that in. I'll give you a few seconds and I'll bring up the rest of this page and clear it. And I'll just bring this up here because it's just writing the same numbers again. And we got the 3 and 3. Hopefully this is making good sense to you. Let's try our guided practice. I'm going to ask you to do all 3 of these. When you do that, you're going to pause the video, do all 3 by rounding each mixed number to the nearest whole number. Pay attention to whether it's adding or subtracting. And then we will go over these on the flip side. You may go ahead and pause the video now. Welcome back. Let's see how you did. 2 and an eighth. So it's either be 2 or 3. 1 is less than half of 8. So it's going to stay 2. It's adding. 3 and 5/8. Well, half of 8 is 4 and 5 is bigger than that. So I'll add 1 here and that becomes 4. 2 plus 4 is 6. So my answer is about 6. 5 and 2/9. 2 is less than half of 9. So this stays a 5. Minus. Make sure you have the right symbols here. 2 is greater than half of 3. So this will go up 1. 5 minus 4 is 1. 3 and 3/5. 3 is more than half of 5. So I'll add 1 here and I get a 4. Plus 1 is less than half of 5. So this will just stay the same. 4 plus 1 is 5. Long story short, look at the fraction. If the numerator is less than half of the denominator, this stays the same. If the numerator is half or more of the denominator, we add 1 there. That's going to be the whole thing. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear the document. Let's quickly go through the, see, we already talked about the answers. How would I estimate 8 and 4/7? Well, 4 is greater than half of 7, so 9 minus 4 is 5. Let's give you just a couple more practice problems. Go ahead and do numbers 4, 5, and 6. You may pause the video now. Welcome back. Let's see how we did. This one, 2 is more than half of 3, so I'll add 1 to that 7, and I get an 8. I'll write my subtraction. 1 is less than half of 4, so it stays at 4. My answer is 4. Now we go to adding. 1 is less than half of 3, so this stays 5. 7 is more than half of 9, so I'll add 1 there to make that 3 of 4. I add them together, I get a 9. This beginning 9, there's a 9 because 1 is less than half of 7. Now this 6 is almost a 7, so I'll add 1 there. 9 minus 6 is 3. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear the drawing. And just a reminder on the homework, do the same thing. It's up to you whether you want to do it vertically or horizontally. In this situation, either works. On problems 7 and 8, use these pictures to answer those questions. On 5, make sure you read the questions carefully. Sorry, 9, make sure you read them carefully. And number 10, you'll need that chart. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, either during class or via email. Hope you have a Minogija. Meanwhile, I'm a P.